Hello, 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 and welcome back to Coffee and Grace, your weekly destination for brave conversation and thoughtful connections. I am your host, Dee Kendricks, and if I seem incredibly hyped today, it is because I was off last week, not intentionally, because that's just how life happens sometimes. And I missed you guys. I missed being able to dialogue with you regarding a new topic that I'm passionate about. But here we are today, and we're back. Episode 6. I want you to first, before you even, I want you to press pause right now. And I want you to go to any of our social media pages or right here in the YouTube channel, right below in the comment box, even for this episode. I want you to tell us what's been your favorite episode so far and why. What do you love? What do you want more of? Because we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want us to produce for you, because that's the kind of show we're running over here. Isn't that what family and friends do? So now that we've got that out of the way, what is on my mind and what's in my cup? So what's in my cup today is some concoction, but I will tell you that the base of it is Havana, Cuban rum. And so I'm happy and excited about that. What is on my mind today is that it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And some may or may not know that I am probably an informal, and in some cases in circles formal, advocate and proponent for mental health awareness. And I thought that it was our due diligence and our privilege to make sure we did an episode with intentional focus around mental health advocacy and awareness. And so for that conversation, I invited one of my most favorite therapists in the world. She's never been my therapist, but she is my favorite, Dr. Lia Knox. And so let's welcome Dr. Lia Knox to the coffee table. Hello, Lia.
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I mean, of course. What else could I possibly do? It is your topic. And so for those who may not know, and if you are anywhere on any of our social media pages, you would know that Dr. Knox is not only my favorite therapist, even though she hasn't been my personal therapist. You also know that she is a dear, dear friend. In fact, I would say she's a sister. And the more I think about it, I'm a little scabuffled around why I haven't inappropriately taken advantage of the fact that you're a therapist and gotten all the free therapy I can possibly get. I mean, you're a great big sister, and so we have our crisis moment calls. But yeah, anyway, you know how I tend to loodle. So a little bit about Dr. Knox, because there's so much to say. I would say that number one, Dr. Knox is a mental health community queen expert, and that she is not only operating her own consultancy, her own practice, but also really connected to strategic partnerships in a number of communities, making sure that we not only have awareness around mental health, but that actually she's creating mental health clinics and group support systems, which I just think is the dopest thing on the face of the earth. And so we are going to dig into a chat today because I've had some things on my mind. And so first of all, Leah, what are you drinking? What's in your cup?
So
What you got,
it is
girl?
a beautiful day in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. However,
Shout
kind of
out.
gloomy. So I thought I have my sunshine cup. So I'm drinking coffee,
Oh,
hazelnut coffee, but I have a lot of sugar in it. Don't tell anybody.
so you're
With a
just
little
not
bit
going
of
to drink on
almond
the job
cream.
today. I'm the only one drinking on the job.
What do you have?
Listen, there is something from Aussie Shelf. All I know is it said Cuban and Havana, and it was brown, and I mixed it with some stuff, and it's good, and I need it, and I think it'll calm me for the conversation.
So there's nothing wrong with that because, on a random Saturday and or Sunday or day off, we too have a little bourbon cream in our coffee. So
Yes. I don't
nothing wrong
even,
with that.
nothing, and I don't, to be clear, it ain't cream, it's just straight.
It could also be
I
straight Jameson as well.
I am channeling Mr. Ossie Kendricks today with drinking habits. So anyway, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Isn't that interesting? So let's you and I met maybe 4 years ago, maybe longer. I don't know. It feels like I don't know how you've not been in my life my entire life. And our families are connected and this is when we rolled the lovely photos. And, and we have a ton of amazing outings together. But one of the things that we share is our love for people, our love for awareness, and particularly our love for, I won't say even our love, our passion around mental health. And although you operate in it from a very different perspective, we have had some really profound conversations regarding it. And as I was trying to think about what this conversation today with our audience should be, what we should focus on for, this particular month, and I'm sure this won't be our only mental health focused episode, but it's poetic that it's within the focus month. I thought that the only sincere way, an effective way to start that conversation is really to start it with a little bit of my own journey, my own personal journey. And I know that there's conversations I've had with you about that, but I don't know if I've had them in depth. And so I figured I'd start this conversation with talking about one of the most pivotal moments for me in my mental health journey was the first time that I actually engaged with a therapist, like in a formal relationship, which for me, I think was maybe 10 years ago. Maybe it was less than 10. What year is this? So no, it was maybe 7-ish years ago. And around that time in my career, I was in banking, doing regional bank work. And on paper, my career looked fantastic and my life looked fantastic. But my body was shutting down. Like I was having these experiences that I didn't understand where they were coming from. I was diagnosed with endometriosis, but then they couldn't solve that. I wasn't breathing right. Weight was up and down, and I wasn't sleeping, et cetera. Anyway, it led to the point where I was really unable to do the job. I was having to, because I was over 2 states at the time, I spent a lot of time driving on the roads. And so at the time I was in Pennsylvania, and it's very, at that point, easy to have at least a 3-hour commute throughout the day between branches or what have you. And I'd be in so much pain and get to a point where I was hyperventilating at some times that I would have to pull over. Well, long story short, I eventually had to take a leave of absence, and was going through these series of tests from through all the doctors. And one of my doctors actually was looking at my eyes and he's like, "How much sleep are you getting at night?" And without blinking, I said, "Oh, maybe 4 hours." And he's like, "On a regular?" And I said, "Yeah." And I went over my schedule, right? I was just kind of like, work for me starts 6 a.m. and I get in maybe about 9, but then I have to do all the other work. And by the time I get to sleep, it's 12, but then I can't sleep until about 3. And then I'm back up to do it all over again.
Ooh.
Right. And so he said, I am going to, I want you to go ahead and get, he didn't say assessment, but basically maybe a consult or something. So anyway, and then told me that he wouldn't release me back to work until I did with a therapist or a psychologist. It might have been a psychiatrist. I don't know. And so I went, and I can remember the first conversation like it was yesterday that I barely, to some extent, made it through. And I remember at the end of the conversation him saying, "So I want to, at this point in time, see each other at least 3 to 4 times a week." Now, at the time, I didn't know what I know now, which is that is not the usual cadence for a client, patient, or therapist and patient visit schedule. And what I know now is that I was clearly in crisis.
For sure.
Right? And that it's so funny to me how during that time I had blocked out the fact that anything that I was experiencing, being on the floor in a fetal position, feeling paralyzed like I couldn't move, that any of that was connected to my mental health. And I wanted to start this conversation really with the fact that for whatever reason, none of that signaled to me, Deirdre, you are in crisis. Not even a doctor saying, I want to see you 3 times a week. And I will tell you that that went on for the next 90 days before he moved me to a once a week schedule. How many individuals, how many women right now are in crisis and don't know it? Because I think that we normalize this unhealthy pace in life, and particularly as women, this multitasking, and because we're called, emotional, and so all of those things seem and feel normal to us, and so we don't stop and think this is a sign or trigger of something else. So anyway, I want to stop talking. I want you, Lia, to how do we know when we're in crisis? What are the signs? What are the signals? What did I miss?
So, first thing I want to do is to make sure that people know that it is very common for you to miss the signs, because who walks around actually knowing, oh, what are the signs of some
Mm,
mental health issues that I could be going through?
mm-hmm.
Many times they show up physically before we even recognize that, oh my goodness, mentally, emotionally, I'm not doing well. So some of the signs and symptoms could be, I have a really bad headache, or you know what, my stomach is killing me. I'm having all these
Mm-hmm.
gastrointestinal things going on. I'm urinating a lot, or I'm constipated. I really don't have an appetite, or I cannot get full enough.
Mm,
Um, I have these heart palpitations and just beating out of my chest. I'm washing dishes, and next thing you know, my heart is beating. I'm sweating. I'm shaking, and it feels like I'm about to have a heart attack. So I go to the emergency room, and I continue to go to the emergency room, but they can't ever find anything wrong. I'm hyperventilating.
mm,
Sometimes my aches and joints in my back and my shoulders and my neck feel so terrible, I have to just lay down. Sometimes it feels like I have a cold or the flu, and I take Benadryl, NyQuil, all these things. Nothing seems to help other than I get a good night's sleep, maybe, or I really cannot sleep. I'm having the worst time sleeping, similar to your symptoms. I can't sleep, or you know what? I'm so busy. 4 hours of sleep is normal. And the doctor's looking at you like, what'd you just say? But keeping a straight face all the while because he knows that's not normal or healthy for your body.
mm.
Also, feeling as though there's a sense of doom. I wake up in the morning, if I can even wake up, and I just sit on the side of the bed. There's a statue by a famous African American artist, and he shows an African American woman with rollers in her head, and she has on a bathrobe, and she's sitting on the side of the bed, and she just leaned over like, I cannot take one more step, because her body feels so tired, so lethargic. You can be at work or taking care of the kids, and you just can't take one more step. The fatigue is that real.
So how
Um,
do we, because let's keep it real, right? All
mhm,
of us are walking around tired. You named a number of symptoms, right, that feel
mhm,
like the everyday conversation in any working adult.
mhm.
So I beg to wonder, given that most of us don't realize that although we're bossing and achieving our goals,
Mhm.
that we are literally one prayer and one disappointment away from total breakdown, if not worse. Have we normalized being in crisis?
We absolutely have. Our society has.
Tell me
Um,
more.
So, with normalizing being in crisis, first of all, there's a huge stigma with mental wellness. Instead of, for instance, if you feel sick or what have you, I think I have a cold. No, you don't have a cold, you're fine. Even the
Mm.
stigma of not being well with a
Mm-hmm.
cold,
Mm-hmm.
or I happen to have COVID. Oh my goodness. Your wellness is very important. So that stigma of I don't feel well, that has been normalized. So now we always have to be feeling well. So
Mm.
when it comes to our society and normalizing that crisis, it's become a huge problem. The one key to knowing that you are not doing well mentally is when those signs and symptoms that I just named, among 10 other ones that I haven't named because we don't have time, is that it interrupts your daily functioning.
Mm.
It interrupts your functioning.
Oh my
So
God.
you can be tired.
So wait a minute. I want to pause right there real quick. When you say it interrupts your functioning, so I know that for me, um, I'm not going to name no names, but maybe people in my house, friends, families, clients, you name it, right?
Hmm.
There are periods throughout the day where I know myself and all of those folks find it hard to focus on the task they're supposed to focus on.
Hmm.
Whether our, and we all have, in my opinion, different activities. So whether it's we, go to social media, whether we go play a game on our phone, or if you're me, you attend any other task than the task ahead, or you start walking around the house, whatever. Are you saying to me that those signs are typically little bits of nudges that wellness has been fractured and is at risk?
So I'll say there's a slight difference. For
Okay.
instance, let's say if you're working or what have you, and you feel like, all right, can't take this anymore subconsciously. I'm going to go play this game. I'm going to go on Facebook. It is your body and your mind saying, can't do that anymore.
Mm,
I need a break. It's not
got it.
necessarily unhealthy. That's your body and mind actually telling you, I'm going to do this for you because you haven't even done it for yourself.
But then what
So
if it
that
happens
drifting
every
away.
day?
So if it's happening every day, that is a sign that, okay, part of it is distraction, which is a sign of maybe not doing as well as I should, because generally an adult, and we're not talking about kids right now, can focus on something for a matter of an hour, maybe two, and get that done. However, if it's every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 20 or 30 minutes, I'm here, I'm there, I'm darting, or I feel a sense of, I can't do this anymore. I don't think I can take it anymore. Could be a sign of, you know what, I'm not doing well.
Mm.
I'm not doing as well as I should be doing. And not social comparison, but comparison to my norm. First, we have
Ooh,
to
preach
figure out
about
what
that.
our norm and balance
So,
is.
so I'm gonna pause you for 2 seconds right there. In fact, I want you to roll that back. What did you say? Not social comparison, but what?
Not social comparison, but our norm, our own internal norm or baseline.
I don't
What is
even think
my
most of
baseline?
us know what our baseline is.
We haven't taken the time, most of us, to even figure that out because social comparison is real. We look at our friend, we look at social media, we look at
Yes.
people that are maybe doing what we do or we want to do, and we
Yes.
strive to do that when in fact we haven't even first checked in with ourselves, taken that quiet moment or taken a moment with someone that we know so intimately to say, you know what? I need to figure out where my norm is. Do I need that 8 to 10 hours of sleep or even 14, which is
Ooh,
fine?
preach. I think, I think the term mommy guilt has become pretty popular. I think the term success comparison has become popular. But I don't think that we have brought to the public forum table, that's how I'll put it. It certainly isn't normalized, so I needed to figure out something else to even say that. Acknowledging the fact that subconscious social comparison around energy and mental and emotional capacity is an internal challenge and syndrome that is slowly and silently eroding at our mental health and awareness every day. And I'll give you an example because I think most of us do it unintentionally, right? Like,
Oh, yes.
especially if you live with somebody, right? So if I were to think about my household, my husband and I we work very differently, yet we're both workaholics. But we have very different capacities for very different things. And so I can just imagine for both of us, not just one of us, both of us, this unspoken comparison of, I have to keep up energy wise. He's up at this time. Well, I got to make sure, right? Or she worked that long. I could probably get another hour in, right? When the reality is, we are all, just like our the same way this vaccination impacts us all differently because of our DNA is different and our immune system is different. We all have this different capacity level for stress, period.
Well, you use two important words in who you are and what you do. First of all, we have coffee and grace. You have to show yourself grace. You
Amen.
have to give yourself grace. Listen, I do need to sleep. I do need to chill. I do not have to compare myself with the energy and levels of my spouse, of my child, even. Some of us have college age children in our home and
Of my
they're up
colleague
or
or what
not,
my mother did when
or what
she
my
was my
mother did.
age.
I've always, I remember I used to always say, Mom, we'll never be alike. I am the spinning image of her professionally, physically, the whole nine. I love it now, but she's the Energizer Bunny. She's 72, looks like she's 50,
She
and she's
does.
still out there in them streets. Who else does the same thing? Myself. So when it comes to these things and what we do with our lives, showing ourselves grace and showing the person or people that we're around grace.
Well, we
It's
can't
okay.
show
Yeah,
them
chill.
grace if we don't learn how to show ourselves grace, which is part of the whole reason
Absolutely.
I started this show, right? If anybody ever goes to to the webpage, and looks, at our mission vision somewhere within there, but our brand essentials, one of my mission statements is that this show is geared towards starting a race of grace within. And the primary reason for that is because I am a living witness in more ways than one, individually, and seeing groups and organizations of individuals, that when a person masters at least the conscious effort and practice of self grace, they become a significant empathetic soul to any and everyone around them. And they grow within that. And then they spread that within every area that they touch and influence it in every way, whether it's showing up as a better leader, a better parent, a better community person. And so I love that you say that. I want to go to something real quick. I want to talk about some numbers, and I'm doubling down on my paper because I want to make sure that I don't get them wrong. Number one, depression is noted as the leading cause of disability worldwide. That's number one. That, interesting. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for individuals between 10 and 34 in the world, not the US, the world. That was so sobering. Like, so sobering, because what literally brought tears to my eyes when I read that statistic is that most individuals who struggle with suicidal thoughts are folks who feel unheard, folks who feel alone, folks who feel like what they feel isn't, I won't say isn't normal. And it made me think back to an experience. Did I ever tell you my disclosure story?
No.
So, at the height of my career, I got asked to do an interview with Biz Journal. And the article was around millennials, senior leader millennials, and work-life balance and how they balance their careers or whatever, right? And I felt like I was set up because in the middle of that interview, she asked me, so how do you balance mental health? And how is the stress level to become a vice president by 30 not impacted that? And up until that point, the only people who knew about my diagnosis with depression and anxiety were super close friends. And I think I told like my mother, right? And I started to stay in what I like to call cover mode. But in that split second, I knew that I could either continue to withhold and show up as the picture perfect, quote unquote, black female executive, but how many lives would be at risk because I missed the opportunity to let them know, me too. And so in that interview, when she asked that question, I told her, for decades of my career, I didn't balance it. And it led to not only breakdowns, but discovery of the fact that I am diagnosed with major depressive disorder and anxiety. And I'll never know whether it was genetic or whether I allowed myself to kind of get there. And what that brings, and I'll back up a minute. That was the hardest thing, one of the hardest things in my life I had to do. But I'll never forget how many people responded and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I remember the anxiety attack that I had having to call literally every head of business function that was going to be impacted to say, I need to formally disclose to you because this article is coming out tomorrow. And to somebody today, because this was 5 or 6 years ago. And let's be clear, mental health awareness was not what it was. What it was then, it's not what it was today, or vice versa.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? But that makes me ask another question. When I tell you the statistics around suicide, depression, and my disclosure, I'm curious. I want to dig a deeper layer here. Where do women sit in the numbers today, Lia, as it pertains to mental health or illness, should I say?
So 1 in 5 women in the United States and throughout the world, so I say both, suffer and experience a mental health issue within a year. And that would include the highest is depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. 1 in 5. Women between the ages of 16 and 25 admit to self-harming. So out of those 16 to 25-year-olds, many admit to self-harming, whether it be cutting themselves, being engaged in very dangerous activities, risky activities. Also, 10 to 20% of women experience depression during pregnancy, because we tend to concentrate on postpartum depression. But during pregnancy and postpartum depression, 10 to 20%, something that moms, grandmas, great grandmas, and aunts tend not to talk about as much.
Well,
And so that's something that needs to really be spoken about, because if not treated during pregnancy or shortly after, it becomes major depressive disorder. And among women, that is the highest rate of depression, major depressive disorder.
so wait, I've got the highest rate of depression.
But that's okay, because I mean it falls in line.
As
Not
only
okay.
you and I would start laughing over that, by the
Exactly.
way.
We're like, but we could get treated.
That part. Thanks for the meds, doc.
Right.
And the therapy, and I'm laughing only because today I have had to make it such a part of my normal language so that when I hit those moments of anxiety, and anyone who struggles with it knows this, I can almost tear up sometimes. I can recall having a very heart-to-heart conversation with who wasn't my husband then, but is now my husband, maybe a couple of years ago, when I was experiencing a pretty deep episode. And he said, I need you to let me know when you need help. And I said to him, here's what I need you to understand. By the time the episode hits, help is the last thing we know how to ask for. And so I have realized I'm so vocal about it now, and even maybe casual about it, because what that causes as a ripple effect is that when the episodes, when life hits me and I hit this wall that I probably see coming but couldn't stop, the crash, it makes it much easier for me to say, wait a minute, I'm struggling. I don't know what to ask for. In fact, I can recall last week calling you, right? Because if I be completely honest, I'm probably managing a little bit of a crisis mode right now, which I'm okay with, to some extent, because I think sometimes these moments happen so that we, to your point, can know our bodies and minds are telling us the rate we're going, how we're doing things is not sustainable. And so you got to
Right.
stop. And so I, normalize it. But I do want to know, when we go back to what you said, those are so a few things. Number one, I heard 1 in 5. Number two, I heard the fact that postpartum depression is not the only pregnancy related depression, and that oftentimes culturally and generationally, information is not being passed on, and so each generation tends to feel alone in this. And it's still not something that I think you see on pamphlets and TV shows or anything else. The other thing that I heard, was that at least once a year, which tells me that all of the diagnoses aren't always genetic, that some of them are situational and episode based, which means there are things in life. And so, what I want to ask you is, how did we get here, right? Like, what are some of the, whether it's historical or what are the data saying, what's the data saying around women in particular? What are the triggers? Is it, how is it showing up in relationships, work? And if you, while you're answering this, if there's any sliced data that I'd love to know around ethnicity and race.
So yes, there's sliced data finally, and because of the push for cultural competency, um, probably about 2 decades ago, it's been wonderful. So with that being said, when it comes to, for instance, a post traumatic stress disorder, women are likely to be the number one reason for post traumatic stress disorder is sexual violence
Mm.
and domestic and physical abuse. However, among Black women,
Ooh.
that is the number one. They are the highest um, population to be sexually abused or
Why?
assaulted.
Why? I mean, we
Um,
we know that to some extent, right? Because I think we're starting to become more vocal about all of the stories that, for a lot of generations, died in the grave, about our families and things that have been done. And I, as a victim of molestation from my childhood, I know how dangerous it can be when not discussed. But what I'm so also interested in hearing, why is this so prevalent in the Black community?
So within the Black community, as well as others, because within the Black community, Black women are simply and not simply not valued as highly within our system, within our communities. So if you go back to the 1500s
Mm-hmm.
of slavery, women were traded, but we were there to produce, to make children, and the children were workers, so as laborers. So instead of being seen as humans, we were seen as a calf or an animal to produce yet
Mm.
another to breed. So at that point, we were no longer seen as humans, and we weren't from the first place, but to see as breeders. As we went forward into the slave master's quarters, now we were seen as a sexual pleasure and also someone to help care for the slave master's
Woo.
children, as well as to breastfeed and so on and so forth. So now we are seen as someone to work for or to please, so on and so forth. So that continues on within our Black cultures and within our
Because it
Black
gets passed on
families,
generation to generation
generation to
by
generation. So we
predator
have
to
incest.
predator
Yes, incest within
offense.
families. We have people outside of the culture who may see a Black woman or a Black girl as an object,
Yes.
something or someone to abuse, to take anger out on. So the highest rate of young women or even older within the African American community is sexual offense or sexual abuse.
And
Next is
so
domestic violence.
it is, and we know domestic violence is so closely connected to mental illness and on both ends, to be very
Yes,
honest.
for sure.
Something that's forming in my head, and then I got to move on. I can't believe it's almost time to wrap up, believe it or not.
Oh, wow, that went
Um,
fast.
it's interesting to me that when I asked you why sexual violence, right, is so prevalent within the Black community, that the information you provided connected us back to slavery and the implications of the standard and practice of abusing Black women and devaluing Black women in slavery. And that we are still living, right, from the implications from, and so that is, and it's, I could sit on here forever, because immediately what started going through my mind is, we often say that the Black man has it the hardest in the community. And I believe and still say that the Black man as a whole, community-wide, and I don't just mean Black community, blah, 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 is probably the least respected, because I think he's seen as the biggest threat. I'm going to have a lot of people disagree with me, but that's okay. But I have began, especially doing cultural work in corporate America, to identify that the Black man is not the least valued in America. The Black woman is.
And
Go right ahead.
historical trauma is real, it is true, and that I would have to agree. Um, it has been going on for hundreds of years now, and I once again I would have to agree, and
I,
I
I know,
I believe I've
I know
said
you
it.
well enough to know that what you're saying in your head is we could sit here and talk about this for hours. And you
I'm
know
not even
what?
trying to open Pandora's box.
You know what? And we are. Part of me wants to do a part two, and we might have to do a part two next week. So I don't know what your schedule is, but we might have to do a part two next week, because I know folks are going to be like, y'all just got started. You have got to be kidding me. So I'm trying to figure out, everybody watching me, pause. Do I go to the next segment to wrap up, or do I say stay tuned till next week? And I think I'm going to say stay tuned, because what I want to do next week is also dig into how, when we talk about these statistics, how are they showing up in different areas of our lives? How are they showing up in the workplace as the employee, as the CEO, as the Black female executive? How are they showing up as a wife, as a girlfriend? And how are they showing up as a mother? And what are the patterns? And what is it showing up in when we're teenagers? And we don't have time to dig into that, but I want to. The other thing I want to dig into in our part two, as I hijack your calendar for next week, is the fact that I think that we, some would say we normalize the language, mental health and wellness. I don't think it's to the point where it's normalized, where I think it's become common. I think it's become commonplace for people to say in the overall community, and I think in ethnic communities a little less, to say, hey, it's okay to go to a therapist. I think that's become common. I think what hasn't become common is it happening, that mental wellness, and not just mental wellness, mental fitness has not become a thing. And even the people that I'm mostly connected to, by the time they're calling their therapist, they're in a mental version of a heart attack, right? Even people who are well aware, like myself, The work that I have to do sometime to be like, Deirdre, schedule an appointment. And sometimes it's because you moved, you don't want to find a new one, etc. But I want to come back to that conversation. So I always still like to leave people with on a good note. And by good, I mean helpful note. So although we're not going to end where we were, what I do want to know before I wrap up your part is if someone is in crisis today, if they heard some symptoms and they found themselves in this conversation in a way that connected all too much, and they're not sure what the next thing they should do, and maybe not comfortable reaching out to a therapist just yet because they don't even know where to begin, because that's a whole nother thing. The access to mental health support in America is a challenging thing. But what would you say to our audience and our coffee table family if they found themselves in this conversation and do not have a normal practice, or they thought they had a normal practice but still notice, oh my God, I'm one of the folks who I'm realizing that my distraction every day is my body saying I'm doing too much. What now?
If you're feeling like it's overwhelming, or you're even feeling like, I don't want to be here anymore, which the stigma is there, and you may not want to say anything because you think, oh, someone may take my children, or they may think I'm crazy. Not at all. You can call a hotline anonymously, National Suicide Prevention Line, and that number is 1-800 273 8255. 1-800-273-TALK. That's 8255. Also, I would definitely, if you trust your pastor, if you trust a close friend, sister, brother, it's okay to reach out. I know that in some of the communities, they'll have free services or low cost services, or mainly free services where they have numbers and you can either Google it. If you don't have Wi Fi connection, ask a friend, can you look this up on your phone?
Mm-hmm.
I just really need to talk to someone, because everyone thinks everyone has and can afford Wi Fi and insurance. Not at all. Ask someone, hey, I just need a number. Can you get it for me? You don't have to disclose. Get that number and call, and you can call anonymously in your community and in your area.
Thank you so very much. And we have that showing at the bottom of the screen. I tell you, I've got the best production technicians, engineers in the world. Um, Leah, sister girl, Dr. Knox. I don't know what to say other than I'll see you next Wednesday. I don't know what you have to cancel. Okay, but I will see you back here because we have a conversation to finish for the people. I knew it was going to be dynamic. So with that, I don't have to be so sad to say we're wrapping up. But thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to go into the last sip. All right. Whew. Was that not a lot? I mean, but it's the conversation that's not happening enough. And when we started this platform, I told you that we were going to bring the conversations that were going to bring about transformation. Hopefully that first starts right here with each of us individually, because that's how we transform the world. And so for my last sip today, it is a quote from Queen Beyonce, actually, from Elle magazine. Back in 2019, Beyonce took a year off and publicly stated that she was doing so to focus on her mental health. And she quoted this saying, I need you to know that mental stability can get you indoors that hustling can't. And that spoke to me because I think we don't have a ton of, and particularly Black artists, ethnic artists in the community that not only speak to mental health and wellness, but operate in a space of functioning in that wellness and doing what needs to happen to protect it at all costs. oftentimes mental illness is genetic. And I'm not sure whether my diagnosis was genetic. I do know that oftentimes in our community, the Black community, there are more known diagnoses like hypertension or diabetes or cholesterol. And I didn't get any of those. But I do know that on one side of my family that mental illness is pretty prevalent. And so I would say that there are definitely some traits that ended up in my DNA. And that's what I'm managing. But what I will say is this: every single person has to own their mental journey. I think that we treat mental health like air filters in our house that need to be changed once a year, as opposed to something like our car that needs an oil change pretty often. The very thing that helps you function and show up in the way that we all know you, we all need you, and we all love you, is the thing that needs to be taken care of even more than the organs that pump your blood, the organs that we see. You take care of your skin every day, literally every day. Why wouldn't we take care of our mind? And so with that, I hope you tune in to next week for part 2 of our mental health discussion around, have we normalized crisis, and where do we go from here to normalizing mental fitness? Until next week, my friends, thank you for joining us at the coffee table. Thank you for joining the conversation. It was such a privilege to have you. We hope that you would keep joining the conversations. Meet us over at our social media, where there's always a coffee and grace conversation happening.